Welcome to Bold Agendas, a series of thought leadership podcasts dedicated to the discussion of transformation management. In each podcast, we dive into topics of strategic interest to business leaders who are driving transformative change in their organizations. Today, we're tackling one of the most compelling challenges in business, creating thriving organizations by putting employees first. While many companies prioritize customers, research increasingly shows that the most enduring and successful businesses focus just as much, if not more, on their workers. To explore this transformative idea, I'm thrilled to welcome Stephan Meier, a distinguished professor at Columbia Business School and the author of the new groundbreaking book, The Employee Advantage: How Putting Workers First Helps Business Thrive. Stephan is renowned for his work in behavioral economics and business strategy, and his latest book offers a strategic roadmap for leaders looking to unlock the full potential of their organizations through an employee-centric approach. Drawing on a wealth of evidence and rich business case studies, Stephan argues that companies that put their people first aren't just doing the right thing, they're gaining a powerful competitive edge. I'm Mimi Brooks, CEO of Logical Design Solutions, a business strategy and transformation consultancy, and I'm a leadership coach. Today, we'll unpack the big ideas from Stephan's book, explore why an employee-first model is critical in today's rapidly changing world, and discuss actionable strategies for building thriving organizations. Let's get started. Good morning, Stephan. Thank you so much for your time and for joining me. This is really a thrill for me to have you on.
Thank you so much, Mimi, for having me on the show. This is amazing.
You know, you're one of the people that I got onto the podcast by stalking you on LinkedIn, I have to admit. And you were kind enough to answer me. So thank you so much. I had heard about the book, I think on Bloomberg, and reached out to you. So it's a thrill to have you on.
I'm so happy that you did.
So your new book is out just recently, right, Stephan? I mean, The Employee Advantage came out. I had pre-ordered it. So October, is
Mid-October, yeah.
Mid-October. And I was saying that I see you all around, different podcasts and media outlets talking about the book. So in a short period of time, you seem to have hit a nerve with this one, in terms of people's interest. Does it feel that way to you?
It does a little bit. I mean, I was hoping that because, I wrote the book with a passion and thought that I can actually convince people to think a little bit more about how to improve the employee experience. I think I was right that it really hit kind of a nerve and it's about time that we change.
And I was saying to you the first time that we spoke, and I say to other people when I recommend the book, and I've recommended it several times, is that what I expected to read when I heard about it, given your academic background, I mean all of this hugely respectfully and in awe, and your behavioral economic background, I thought, I'm going to get through this book no matter what, because I care a lot about the subject. But I found it amazingly, easy to read. The stories were engaging. I think I said to you, it's very consumable, and it's such an important message. And you make a compelling argument on complex issues like how do we ROI, the employee experience? How do we think about this as a strategic investment, et cetera? And so I think people would find that you can get all of the good information out of the book without any of the kind of fighting through it to get the salient points. So good for you.
Yeah, thank you so much. I really tried kind of to combine, compelling case studies and stories with rigorous research results. And then with conceptual framework that really help leaders on any level, to humanize work and make this a better future of work.
The last thing I'll say before we get into our discussion is when I was looking a bit into your background, when I heard about the book and was trying to figure out, who you are and what you were doing, I saw some commentary on social channels that, you're also quite popular with the students at school in terms of people finding your class very engaging and fun. And I saw the commentary on that and I thought, yeah, that makes sense to me. It's kind of a storyteller everywhere.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, part of one of the probably the best part, or one of the best parts about my job, which is really an amazing job, is to engage with like smart and ambitious students here and having discussions, like discussions we are having right now that I'm having with you, Mimi. There, I just have it with like 70 students in the classroom, and that's exciting. I mean, what I also enjoy is not just teaching, but also learning in the conversation, that there are so many smart, interesting people out there. And, I'm just one of them. So I kind of learn from my students and they hopefully learn a little bit from me. And that makes it, and a little bit of fun goes a long way
Sure.
in the learning journey.
For sure. Well, it's apparent. It's apparent in, in your words and in your style and approach. And it's been a pleasure to have the interactions with you I have so far. So let's jump into it, Stephan, because this is a subject of, huge personal interest of mine. And I think our audience, our business leaders who are guiding transformative change in this era of digital, are all trying to figure out how to humanize the workforce. I just don't think it's a goal or objective that isn't part of everyone's agenda at this point. And so I think the questions of, why, making the business case for this, how do we think about and walk towards the light here, and then are there, bigger ideals here that we should be considering in terms of being people that have the opportunity, really the privilege to shape human work. And so that's the way I structured the discussion, Stephan, is a little bit of the why, a lot of the how. We like to think that one advantage of our, listeners tuning in is that they get actionable ideas. It's like a big thing of ours to try to give actionable ideas from smart people like you, and then we'll swing it on the way up and why it's good for humanity too. So let me start with some of these why questions in terms of, what inspired you to take this topic on and to take it on now?
Perfect. Thank you so much, Mimi. Yeah, it actually took me quite a while, in my career to come to the point where I was writing this book. I studied human motivation for a very, very long time and behavioral economics as well. And almost in parallel, I was teaching business strategy to my student, like how companies make more money, like what Walmart should do going forward, what's the issue with PepsiCo, and so on, and so forth. And for the longest time, I almost kept those two sides separate. I would do my research and would teach about business strategy until, quite frankly, the pandemic hit. And during the pandemic, I just experienced that, like, it put a very bright spotlight on like issues within the workplace that are not working as well, or we assumed that this is the way it works. And I just then start to research and find like it's just not working. And it actually wasn't working for a long time, but the pandemic just like accelerated the thinking that we have to change. And that was the first time where I combined thought about like, I'm talking about business strategy. And often when I talk about business strategy, I talk about, how to be customer centric, like what to do with your customer and whatever. And I haven't thought that much about or talked that much about the employees. And then I combined it and thought like, now I'm actually very passionate about that. It was actually a book agent who reached out to me years ago, whether I want to write a book. And he said like, well, you have to be passionate about it. And I was like, I like my research, but I'm actually not that passionate about it. And then after the pandemic, I reached out back to my book agent, said like, now I am. I think I have a message. I want to tell the message, how to combine business strategy with insights from behavioral economics and thinking about the future of work as well. Because I then also started to teach at Columbia an elective on the future of work, what technology does, for work. And so I combine. It's like kind of the book is at the intersection of like a little business strategy, how to compete and how to get a competitive advantage, thinking about humans, what's the human motivation, and then what technology can do and should do in order to humanize even further.
Stephan, when I think about that from a business and enterprise perspective, I think it's a very important point because I don't think there's any doubt that people want to do the right thing. Leaders want to do the right thing. They would, most leaders aren't leaders that, don't care about, people and doing, the important, social imperative ideas. But I think the concept that it's more than a moral imperative, it's good for business. It's good for business. It's good for people. And if we can put those two ideas together, it's not a philanthropic cause that we're asking for people to embrace and run their businesses by. I think what we're saying is your employees as a group of constituents, are as important as your customers or other critical stakeholders to your business. And here's why. I mean, I feel like that's the argument that you were trying to make on the here's why.
Absolutely. So I completely agree with you, Mimi. And I never met an executive, who doesn't want his employees to be the most important asset or says it. But in the end, it needs like real dedication, and hard work to actually do that. Think again about, like customer centricity. There is also no executive who says, I don't care about the customers. But to be really customer centric, needs a lot of work and be very intentional about this. And this is true with the employees as well. And it just helps if it actually has a business purpose as well. It's one thing to think, yeah, we kind of want to, and it's maybe the right thing to do, to care about our employees. It's quite another. And that's my argument to think about. It's actually the way forward to create a competitive advantage by putting your employees. Now, in the subtitle, I say putting employees first. Now, obviously, you also have to care about your customer. There is a lot of constituency that you have to care about, but we have to shift somehow from single-mindedly focus on customer and thinking about the employees as well.
Customer, it's a good point, Stephan. I think customer centricity, as a shared strategic goal, as the North Star that we're all looking at, leaders, workers, we're all looking at trying to anticipate, improve, differentiate, deliver on the customer experience, but we're on the internal side of the organization trying to figure out how to operationalize, right, those strategies. And that's where I think our workers as the workforce here, are the people that are ultimately going to deliver, these customer experiences, large or small, every day or once a month, it doesn't matter. We all basically, I think as workers, have our toes on the front line, on the proverbial front line in some way or another, right? And therefore, we embrace the idea of customer centricity.
Absolutely. And I think, when you think about like what, Amazon was a very customer centric organization, and I like, they're not as particular employee centric, but they're very customer centric. But I like, so there is one quote that Bezos has, and I talk about it in the book, where it says, the good thing about the customers is like they're always dissatisfied. They're always unhappy. And that gives me an opportunity to learn, to do better, to get feedback, to actually improve the experience. Now, I guess very few leaders say like, what is good about our employees? They're always unhappy. And we can now learn to do better.
Right.
But that's exactly the mindset shift that has to happen as like, yeah, I can actually learn from dissatisfaction is an opportunity to learn and grow. But in order to do that, I need to obviously ask the employee, I have to talk to them like as I do with the customers. And I think we got a long way in customer centricity, but I think we're far away from being really employee centric. And the book kind of helps to I hope, like, shift kind of the mindset to think, our employees are like our customers, and we can use similar tools that we used for customer centricity to also apply to employee centricity. And, to your point about the business outcome, making customers happy is a good thing. That allows us then to charge more money, to have a premium, to have more loyalty with your customers. And I think the same should apply when we think about our employees.
So, Stefan, I want to just hang for a couple more questions on this why idea. Then I want to pick up on a bit of the what that you're starting to lean into. So, in the book, you have this concept, you develop a concept about a win-win opportunity versus an either-or outcome. Can you just take a minute and describe, what you're trying to put on the table there?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I think like it's one of the big mindset shift that I argue that we're often talking about leaders think about employees and employee centricity as kind of as either or. You can either care about your employees and and improve the experience, but that comes out of the bottom line. The shareholder, the profits kind of is losing out. And we actually did research on how people talk, executives talk about customers and leaders and employees, and you kind of see this discrepancy. When they talk about customers, it's about opportunity, growth, and when they talk about employees, it's like cost, risk, and that taps into this either or. And I think we have to move towards a mindset that is we can actually create win-win. We can improve the employee experience. We can improve how our employees in the workforce is treated. And as a result, we actually gain as an organization. We actually make more money as a result. Same with customers. Like if we treat them better, we actually make more money. Now, that requires, however, and we talk probably later a little about that requires to think about what actually improves the employee experience. Think about customer centricity as well. Customers, if you would ask customer, here's a service, a product, what do you care about? Now, price is one attribute that probably comes relatively high up in that ranking. But lowering the price is not customer-centric. Customer-centric is improving the experience, figuring out what actually our customers want. And as a result, I can increase the price because, again, they experience a premium product. And we have to think the same when we think about employee centricity as well. So we have to move away from this either the employee or the shareholder to think about, no, we're in this together. We can create a better work employee experience. And as a result, we're actually making more money as a business, and we're going to thrive as a result.
So, Stefan, this issue of how do we ROI this, especially at a time in some industries, where returns might be struggling a bit in terms of where they are in the market. And it's a very top of mind discussion. I was just with a client on the West Coast, and they asked me to come out to talk just about this. How do we think about ROIing our employee experience, especially when what we're cost justifying today needs to come out in some type of operational efficiency. We need to show worker productivity. We need to show operational in order to see the cost justification for this. So what's your, thinking about the best ROI argument, from your perspective in terms of investing in the employee experience?
I mean, so there is first what I think, what is the benefit of it, and then what are the metrics that get at this. I think when you think about employee centricity, I mean, I think what I believe what it does is increases motivation, engagement. That will then increase productivity. That will reduce quit rates. That will help with innovation or being agile. And if the employees have contact to the customers actually improves the customer experience as well. Now, it's a good question, what are actually the metrics that we can measure those? Now, I think engagement levels, quit rates, all those are going to be like the first metrics that help. Now, the problem with with employee centricity and ROI, it's actually the same with customer centricity. Is like it's a medium to long term strategy. If you wanna increase your bottom line tomorrow, the easiest way to do that is firing people, getting rid of people, squeeze out more in the short term. That's gonna help your quarterly results tomorrow. But I believe that destroys your long-term prosperity and the mid or long-term outcome of the organization. So you actually have to think more mid to long-term. It's an investment into your organization, into the culture, into your people that will create benefits and return on investments later on. But I do think, if you look at employee-centric organizations, engagement level go up, which is very measurable. Quit rates are going to go down. Loyalty increases, and as a result, productivity, innovation, and customer experience actually improves as well.
So really what you're saying, right, Stephan, is that you can't pluck out any one piece of this overall employee experience and think that you're going to get a meaningful, view of ROI, that we really, especially if you want to get to innovation, and outcomes that take time for people to, enact both, from a work perspective and from a culture perspective as well.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. That makes sense. So let me move us over to some of these how ideas, in terms of how do leaders run, strategies with employee centricity and employee commitment, as a critical element. What do they need to embrace in terms of principles or systems or processes, that might make this operational?
Yeah, thank you so much. So I really try to think about, this as it may be a shortcut, but like thinking about employees as your customer kind of help to think about those how. And it needs those two mindset shifts. So one we already talked about, kind of moving from either or to win-win, as we do with customers as well. We think about how can we improve the experience of our customer, and as a result, we're going to make more money. And the same applies to the employees. And the second is like how then to what actually motivates people at work? What improves the experience of our employees? And again, when you think about what we do with our customers, they're like some basic principles that we do with customer. We involve them, we get feedback, we listen really carefully about what do they actually want, and then customize kind of the experience to those individual human beings, which we call customers. And I think the same basic principle have to apply to when we think about our employees. Think about like, how can we trust them? How can we get feedback? How can you involve them in the process in order to improve the experience as a result? And I think if we just use the tools from customer centricity, we're getting a long way until the final goal of being really employee centric.
So this concept, I just want to riff on this for 1 second, if I can, Stephen. One thing that I think is true with a lot of our customers is they're not running a steady state business, right? See, we're not running a steady state business. We've got disruption in the marketplace. We've got technology generated disruption. We've got businesses that are responding to social situations, et cetera, all kind of disrupting the workforce at the same time. So this idea of strategies for realizing an employee-centric platform and commitment while the business is going through some very disruptive and dynamic times, I think is also a reality of the business strategies that our clients are running. So I want to almost take a little bit of create a little bit of a list of the things you're talking about that are relevant, particularly in these times. Co-designing human work and the future state with our employees, as we think about, the potential dramatic shifts in how human work gets done, So, just wanted you to kind of factor that a bit for me and tell me what you think.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, it's it's probably getting harder for leaders, in those times, and also in order to be employee centric. I don't think that's easy because command and control and top down is probably easier, but I think it's not adequate for those changing moments where stuff moves so fast everywhere in every division and every business. And so we have to empower our employees more. Organizational structure become flatter. We have to involve, and as you said, we have to now be very intentional about designing the right set of principle within the organization to make sure that we're going to be successful going forward. But it's a much more intentional way of leadership than I think we did in the past. But it involves, it's like empowering employees means like we have to give up some power
Right.
as leaders, which is not always easy to do because you lose some control. But that's the whole point. If you don't give up some of the control, I think it's very, very difficult to move forward in those ever-changing environments that we're facing.
Stephen, I would say to riff on that for just a minute too, that, um, you know, we're going to need to build a summary of what I think you're saying. We're going to need to build new cadences, new systems for our organizational interactions, including, likely flatter organizations, more autonomous teams, leading from behind, the different ideas that suggest if you want engagement that leads to invention, if you want engagement that leads to better decision making, faster decision making relative to the human machine world going forward is the basis of a lot of the growth strategies that our clients are running, right? So the concept of having good strategies for engaging people to bring the very best human ingenuity, into the workplace ends up looking like an imperative to me. Your thoughts?
I completely agree. It's a really it changes dramatically. I think how we think about how organizations are run, how they're structured, and how we have to show up as leaders in this new world. And we did. Human machine interaction or technology is like on top of everybody's mind at the moment, rightly so, because it moves very fast, and it not only affects kind of how work is designed, but also what skills are needed, how we think about the workforce, and last but not least, how we think about the workplace, where work is done. The whole hybrid, remote, distributed work debate. And I think in the end, as you said, and as I argue also in the book, we have to go back and think about how do humans actually work. We're over-indexing a lot on the technology piece, and we're under-indexing on the human. But in human-machine interaction, there is the human. So
Right.
we need to understand what actually makes humans work, what makes them motivated, and how can we use technology to help and not destroy.
Right.
Because if we are implementing it without the humans in mind and the human motivation in mind, it might not actually achieve the results that we want to achieve with doing so.
That goes back to playing this bit of a long game that you were saying before, right? Right, Stephen? Like you have to have some imagination, of where the future of work is going, to realize that some of these investments today, are paving the way in anticipation to those models that will become, central in our overall business operating models. They will become our operating models once tech is less of the differentiator and more of the common capability. And of course, you've got scale issues and such that, will determine the winners or losers, or the winners that take all or most, whatever. I'll leave that argument for another day. But to think that, that the human factor is not going to ultimately be the point of differentiation in terms of sustainable growth strategies is a bit hard to imagine, if you play out, where the future, if we're lucky, seems to be going.
Yeah. No, I really think that, the humans are, if anything, are going to be more important, as you said, also in competition. Like the human factors, how we actually run our organizations, become more important than it was in the past. And the technology might become more of a commodity as well. So I have,
Yeah.
I talked with the head of AI at Morgan Stanley, and he said famously, and when he talked to me, is like, tech is easy, humans are hard.
Right.
It's like to implement. They use for their financial advisor a very elaborate AI system. They call it Next Best Action, which kind of gives their financial advisor all the tools to how they should engage with their client next, and like basically pre-writes emails and so on and so forth. But he says, to actually implement this and get this adapted, it's the humans that are hard. It's to understanding what are financial advisors afraid of, anxious about, what skills do they need to actually adapt it in the right way. In order to do that, you need like a very human-centric change management system.
Right.
He says like the technology is the easy part. To convincing humans to do it and being engaged and motivated, that's really hard.
I'll touch on that a little bit more, just to see, your point of view on this. I think related to that, Stephan, is this idea that, that humans would resist the change just to resist it. In other words, sometimes I hear that philosophy, people won't change. People don't want to change. And, to the contrary, I think that, what I see is that people are eager to change. No one's really trying to displace their relevance in the workplace, right? No one really wants to lose their job, but they do need to understand, what value, we think we're looking for them to create going forward, and how that value seems to align to some purpose or interest of theirs.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I think like, basically every change management problem, there is like will and skill. Are people willing to change?
Yeah.
And are they able to change?
Yeah.
And I think as leaders, we can actually do something on both dimensions. If I don't involve the employees and be very transparent about, I don't want to replace you. I actually want to make you better. I want to augment you. So that actually changes, affects the will. Obviously, if I feel that my organization just wants to get rid of me, why would I embark on that journey? But if the leaders are pretty clear, and the Morgan Stanley is a very good example where they really hammered home, like, we want to make you better. We actually, this tool that we have, we even make it mandatory, not mandatory. If you don't want to do it, you don't want to do it. But we believe it actually makes you better. And that, there was some resistance at the beginning, but then they figured out, like, I actually, it really makes my life, my job much better. And it helps with the will. Now, the skill is the other part. Change requires often new skills. And we actually need to think about how can we help our employees to get better, to learn new skills. And I completely disagree that people don't want to learn new skills. I think quite the opposite. People are very motivated by learning new stuff. Now, if I push it on you, as I like, Mimi, you really have to learn X, Y, and Z. And here is like the training program that my corporate, like that probably doesn't work. But if I empower you, I kind of give you the right tools to craft your own upskilling journey. I think that really leads to then engagement and makes it much easier to do that change management. It is not easy, I'm not saying it's easy to change, but it's doable, and leaders on every level can have a huge part to play in order to make that happen.
I love the will and skill idea. I'm going to use that. It's so simple, but it's really quite accurate. And you know, the concept, to your point, that the technology alone really isn't the focus, right? It is how we'll both augment, to your point, and I would add amplify, the human potential and contribution there, that is more central to the idea of, technology's possible
Right.
promise in the workplace, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, you think there is like many ways on how technology actually can help in many ways. I mean, the easiest is, it's going to do tasks that we should not focus on, makes meeting notes, whatever, all those things during my day, which I would never want, which I don't want to spend much time on. It can obviously help in order to free up capacity to do something else.
That's right.
But there is other aspects where technology can really help. Like one that I think is important, and I talk in the book about one of the motivations is like, social relationships and are really important. Now, most conflicts actually have to do with language. You know, I mean, if I talk about my marriage, a lot of the conflicts we have is about I didn't say the right things,
Yeah.
or like I triggered, or I didn't ask the right question. Uh, in fact, when I met my wife at the very beginning of our relationship, we had conflicts, and she would then say, why didn't you say X? Why didn't we ask me first how I feel, and so on. So I would write I call it my relationship algorithm. I mean, at that point, I didn't use algorithm, the word, but like
Right.
actually wrote in an Apple note, like, here are the 4 steps if I have a conflict with my wife. Her name is Susan. I was like, here's what I have to do. One is like to first ask her, how do you see the problem? To get to the point of it. And then point 2 was like, what I hear is that you're saying whatever. And then she's a consultant. She needs like practical. We have a conflict, and then she wants like, what do we do now?
Yeah.
I'm not like that. I'm like, I just wanted to express that I'm unhappy about something. And that was that's why I said it. And she wants to. So, step 3 is like, what are like concrete things we can now do to improve? And step 4 was like, what's the one thing we start right now? And so that was my algorithm. Now she married me, and I forgot about the algorithm.
Stefan, that is not what I thought you were going to say.
Now AI will not.
Right.
AI will not. AI will know. How did I interact with? I'm not sure partner, but like my team, employees.
Yeah.
How should I? What does team member X? John, what does he need? What does Barbara need? And so on. And so, I mean, that's when we think about personalized customer experience, that what is it what all about. And I think we're only at the beginning to understand, how can AI help us in creating better relationships? How can it actually support me as a leader to be more, be personalizing my experience? And I'm not saying like outsource, I don't need like the AI to then interact with you, Mimi, but like it might help, maybe it listens to the conversation I'm having. Maybe it helps me to prepare for a feedback conversation, as an AI coach. I mean, would a human coach be better? Probably. Is an AI coach better than no coach? Probably. can I get like everybody in the organization can get a coach and kind of practice difficult conversation? I think that's very different way of thinking about AI or technology in order to actually enhance some of those motivators, which have to do with like human interactions, how I deal with each other, how do we communicate, and how do we care, with empathy and so on and so forth.
I think it's a huge point that you're making, Stephen, because it kind of goes back to the ROI discussion in the beginning when we said, and then you said it's not technology, it's more about the humans. But I think if we said, it's more about human relationships, that context would be quite helpful, right, Stephen? Because it really is about how do we think about, helping people manage their relationships in a way that they can be both more satisfied, more productive, their relationships with each other,
Yeah,
their relationships with the organization, their relationships with machines. A lot of this really is a relationship context, right?
absolutely. There's like one of the four motivators I talk about, I call working together works. And it's this idea of like, it's a very, obviously like very human desire, to have meaningful relationships. Everybody who ever worked or played on a well-functioning sports team knows that, if we have the right team spirit, we can achieve stuff that you wouldn't have expected. But those relationships don't come just like that. One actually has to work on those. Uh, you know, there is when I talk to executives about remote work, for example, they often say, we're losing those relationships if we're at
Oh,
home.
right. Yeah. Yeah.
And I then say, well, when we were all in the office, like 50% of workplace had like toxic work cultures. Just because we're together doesn't create positive relationships. We have to work on those. But if we get it right, it can have huge impact. In the book, I talk about one study who did training for middle managers on like having the right relationship, and they trained them and helped them how to have the right language, how to talk to the teams. And then as a result, satisfaction, productivity increased tremendously because they were able to reduce or eliminate that toxic work culture. And then if you ask people, then would you like to come back to the office? About 6 percentage point increase in like, because now I can come back because obviously if the work culture is terrible, I would rather stay at home and do it on Zoom. But if those relationships, as you mentioned, are actually well, and those social relationships are really meaningful, yeah, then I want to go to the office and hang out with my colleagues and my bosses and my managers and my team and work together on hard problems.
So, Stefan, in your book, you cited one of your four fundamental points. There's
Yes.
actually four of them, right? And I
Yes.
think they're all really quite good. So since you
Yeah.
brought them,
Okay.
since you got the working together works, maybe you can just skip a stone over
Okay.
the other ones. Do you need me to tell you what they are? Or you have it?
No. I know those. I
Okay.
mean, the important. So those four are really beyond money. So I'm like, one important point is like, it's not just money.
Right.
The paycheck. So the one I already talked about, like working together works, like having those relationships within. The second is and there is no real order, and like one is more important than the other. The other one is purpose. I call it shoot for the moon. That the employees really feel like meaning and impact in the work they're doing, and I call it shoot for the moon, like because there was this famous quote that I think a lot of people know, that like when President Kennedy visited NASA after he announced that the only goal of NASA is like to bring a man to the moon, there was this janitor said like, I'm not mopping the floor, I'm bringing a man to the moon.
Mm.
Now this is a
That's
very
great. Yeah.
it's a very powerful this purpose. Now in the book I talk about it's also not so easy. So there is like a bunch of steps you need to do. You can't just say I'm going to save the world and people don't feel it. I call it like purpose washing. You can't do purpose washing.
Yeah.
You have to actually do it in the right way. So that's the second. The third is autonomy. And I call it a matter of trust, because autonomy, the flip side of autonomy, and the important part, I think, autonomy is about trust. People want to feel empowered and have discretion in what they're doing. But in order to do that, they need to feel that trust that I actually, as a leader, a manager, a boss, actually gives their team member the necessary trust and empowers them then to do the right thing. This is super motivating for people to feel trusted and to then have empowerment. And the fourth I call just right tasks, which is about competence, that people feel very motivated when they have a task that is just right for their skills. It's not too easy and like boring, but it's also not too hard, which is overwhelming. Now, it's not, it's actually one of well, all four are important, but just right skill, just right task is really important, because most people leave organizations because they're stuck. They don't learn anything. They don't, develop further. And I think it's important for organizations to offer those just right tasks for every individual. Now, it's hard because it involves constantly. Once you done something new for a long time, it gets boring. It gets too easy. And so we constantly need to provide new tasks and new skills. Now, this becomes more natural nowadays, where it moves so fast anyway, where people actually want to learn new skills. So it's those four. So shoot for the moon, a matter of trust, just right tasks, and working together works.
I feel that what you're saying here too, Stephen, connects all the way back to the first point that you were making in terms of getting feedback from our employees the same way that we get feedback from our customers, because in that feedback, you would find some of these things that you're talking about. The work getting boring, it getting mundane, me not feeling, that I've got a purpose here. And I particularly like the purpose washing idea too, because I think that there's a lot of time and money and expense being put into identifying, communicating, reinforcing purpose as the shingle that we all are going to hang, outside of our offices and
Right.
achieve. And but if it is incredible, right? If it isn't actionable, then it doesn't really mean much.
Yeah, exactly. Then it doesn't mean much. People have to feel it. And there is probably a difference between employees and customers. For customers, it's a little harder to find out whether their purpose is really left and right. But as employees,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah, they know.
Exactly.
They know.
You're that right there.
Exactly.
You kind of see the secret sauce. How the sausage is actually made.
Exactly.
So if you don't, live up to the values and the purpose that you're preaching, I think it can be extremely detrimental.
And I think people are, see what you think. I think people are, tolerant of an aspirational idea, as long as the behaviors and the values that are expressed and enacted in terms
Right.
of how we're going to get there, are reasonably aligned.
Right, exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no doubt. So, Stephan, I could just talk to you all day. I'm thinking I'm going to go in and take his course.
You're welcome.
I will become a student. I love your concepts and ideas. So if you see me in the audience, he's going to be like, "Oh my God, that's her."
You're more than welcome to join.
So I think that I will, if it's okay with you, kind of swing this up in the last few minutes that we have. And my questions here, I was calling, humanizing work. And what I'm looking for is your opinion about, why this is so important that we think now about humanizing work with everything that we have, going on environmentally, socially, etc. now. So is there, an imperative here that goes beyond our individual imperatives of corporations or otherwise, in
Yeah.
terms of trying to chase our individual success?
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's a very important question. I mean, in the book, I try to more make it as a business case. But if you ask me personally, is there an ethical imperative to humanize work? I would say absolutely. Work is such an important part of everybody's lives, and it's very important to make sure that people have dignity at work, are engaged and motivated because it's a huge part of their lives. And it actually has implications, not just for the individual, obviously for the organization, I'm talking about that, but for, communities, families outside the organization. People are motivated, engaged, are happier people to be around. And it will then have ripple effect on their family, their kids, the communities as a result. And I think it's a very important part to do that. In ESG, people is the S is the people, the social. There are people when you think about ESG as the sustainability goal, there people is one part of it, and we're focusing a lot on the environment, which is important, obviously, but I think it's equally important to think about, how to actually think about humanizing work, dignity, and actually improving the employee experience, not just for the business, but also because it's just the right thing to do.
It's a huge issue to me. It's the reason I started the podcast, honestly. And I think you tell me what you think, Stephan, is that we could say, it's a responsibility of all of ours, especially those of us who shape this in any way. I almost called Bold Agendas the shapers, people from
Yeah.
around the ecosystem that shape work, regardless of, what industry, you might be involved in. But, I believe it's a responsibility, but I think it's an exciting opportunity too, Stephan.
Yeah.
It really is an opportunity, for us to redefine the value, purpose of human work, that hopefully will return, advantage to us in so many different ways in society and otherwise. So it seems
Yeah.
such a missed opportunity not to, jump on that opportunity now. Thoughts?
I couldn't agree more, Mimi. And you started the podcast as like, most executives want to do that. They feel it as well, that it's the right thing to do. And again, on kind of every level of the organization, whether you're the CEO of a multi-thousand people, multinational organizations, or like the emerging leader of a small team. And hopefully the book kind of gives the justification and the tools to actually do that, to actually follow what most people feel at their heart, as you say, and leaders can actually shape, they can actually do something about
Yeah.
this, and it's in their hands to do the right thing. And if we move into this human-centric future of work, I think it actually, helps the workforce, and I think it helps the businesses as well.
It's a little brave. It might be a little bold, right, in terms of what does it take to, to run these agendas. But, I think that we could all look at the future impact here and think it could be well worth the, personal and financial investments that might
Absolutely.
be
Yes.
required
Yes.
to get there.
I couldn't agree more. Yeah.
So, Stephan, I want to wrap this up and give you a chance, as I do with all of my guests, to leave behind just a few parting words of wisdom. I think you have many. So, if you had to take just a couple that you'd leave to our business leaders who are running these strategies, what might you say?
Yeah, well, it's a hard one. It's choosing like your favorite child. But like, I mean, I think like if you start as a leader, see the workforce as individual human beings with lives, desires, and human motivation, you actually can start humanizing work. And we do that with customers. And again, there is like the customers the employees are the new customer. We think about our customer. What do they desire? What do they need? They're all individuals. How do we segment? How do we think about personas in customers? And I think we have to do the same with our employees and see the workforce as like, those are individual human beings. And that's the first step. I think that then leads to the second, which is like really understanding what motivates people. There is a lot of science about this. So if we take the science seriously and try to understand, what actually gets people out of bed, what gets them jazzed up and engaged and motivated, and then use it to humanize work for maximum engagement. And I think last but not least, top of mind now is technology all the time. And we have to be very careful in using technology not to destroy, but to actually enhance those motivators. And if we have those motivators in mind, I think we can make much better decisions in actually deploying technology to make work even more human-centric and not less so.
So I will leave it at that. There's nothing else I could possibly add that would be useful. But Stephan, thank you very much. Thank you for your book. You're a nice guy. You're a nice guy to come on and having done this. And I think your cause is genuinely nice and comes at a critically important time. I would love to have you back on in a year or so and see what you learned, see what you heard,
Sure.
see what you learned, and where you're going
Yeah.
next. But
yeah, thank you so much for having me on the show. And, I would love to come back and hear how what you learned or what some of the listeners learned and get as I mentioned before, kind of learn myself and how to move this agenda forward.
You know what? It takes a village, right? And I think
Right.
that the more that we can move good ideas across it, the better off we all
Absolutely.
are.
Absolutely.
So thank you again. Enjoy your holiday since we're in the holiday season now. And I'll look forward to talking to you again soon.
Thanks so much, Mimi.
Take care.